for inviting me and asking me to write this report. Before I go into all the gloomy, dismal things that the survey and the research found, I just want to reiterate what Sean and Ellen have said, that basically Access to Work has the potential to be really a flagship disability employment scheme. Studies have shown that for every £1 invested in the scheme, there's a net return to the Treasury of £1.48. The scheme was launched in 1994, and it's a real cornerstone in the fight for equal rights for deaf and disabled people, because it allows employers to recruit disabled people without fearing that they're going to incur disproportionate costs for their support needs. So it complements employers' duties under the Equalities Act of 2010. Access to Work is modelled on a genuine social model of disability, in the sense that it reflects the idea that society has a responsibility to remove the barriers in place and to level the playing field, to allow deaf and disabled people to access all opportunities within our economy and our society. Not surprisingly, it was notwithstanding all the problems with the scheme, it was very popular with respondents to the survey, who basically said it's changed their life, and they credited it with giving them purpose, independence and opportunity. We heard from about 320 people responding to the survey that ran from December 2015 onwards. And if you look on page 2, I'm working from the handouts. I don't know if everyone's got the handouts. On page 2 of the handouts, there's you can see a pie chart and some key characteristics of the people we heard from. I won't go over those, but if we look at the pie chart, we can see how the success of the Access to Work scheme is reflected in the diversity of employment sectors that people we heard from were employed in. So we heard from social workers, senior local government officials, television performers, even a member of the clergy. There was a real diversity of employment sectors and across at all levels of the labour market. Turning to page 4, I'll run through the key findings that the survey came up with. Number 1 is that jobs are being put at risk by changes to Access to Work. 43% of respondents said that the recent changes have made it more difficult to do their job. Number 2, for too many customers, Access to Work is simply inaccessible, which is a tragic irony given the purpose of the scheme. Thirdly, and shockingly, 61% of people who had an adverse experience didn't know the reason for the changes to their support. So there's a real lack of transparency over decision making. It's also important to note that these changes were affecting not just the so-called high-value award holders that DWP is targeting with the cap. 1/3 of those who'd had changes actually had less than 5 hours of support per week, so it was affecting customers across the board. The survey run by Stop Changes campaign was very open-ended. It just asked people what changes they'd experienced with their support. Analysing all their responses, there were 2 clear themes that came up. One was that there was a general reduction in the value of awards, and 2 was that there was a general increase in the amount of hoops that people had to jump through, or the administrative and bureaucratic obstacles they faced, which in many cases made the scheme unviable altogether. To give you some examples of the reduction in awards and how this is happening, repairs to equipment. Where equipment had been provided by Access to Work, people were told they wasn't eligible for repairs, so people needing wheelchairs simply couldn't afford to repair them and lost the use of the equipment. People were finding that their awards had been automatically cut following, say, a period in hospital or holiday leave where they underspent their award. They came back to find that their award had automatically been cut. A very common theme was people were told their support had been cut because of new rules or new guidance, and often the ideas of minimum needs and cost effectiveness, these were 2 phrases that were often heard. I'll give you some examples of how this minimum needs and cost effectiveness is being interpreted. So a deaf person working full-time in a hearing organisation was having their support cut from 5 days to just 3 days a week, because they were told they didn't have a need to communicate on the other 2 days of the week, so they were left without any support whatsoever and unable to communicate with their colleagues. The cost-effectiveness guidance is often being used, as we heard from Mahmouda, to provide support solutions that are technological support solutions over human support, because it's cheaper, but very often it simply doesn't meet people's needs at all. Probably the most shocking example I heard of the cost-effectiveness guidance being used was a deaf person had their support cut altogether because they were told that a hearing person could do their job just as well as they could. So we see whatever the reasons behind this new guidance, the way it's being interpreted means that deaf and disabled people are facing exactly the kinds of discrimination that the scheme is set up to tackle in the first place. As we've heard, there was a big concern about the impact of the cap on maximum awards, although this hadn't actually come into place yet at the time of the survey. Going on to look at some of the administrative obstacles that were in place, the change to the call centre, and with it the loss of the personal caseworker and the general de-skilling of access to work advisors, this continues to cause major problems in customer service, especially for those customer groups, the deaf and the autistic spectrum groups, for whom the telephone support system is simply inaccessible. Although we have heard that there have been improvements due to the video relay service for BSL users, that has been an improvement in recent times. We heard of delays. So delays to processing applications meant that people were starting a new job without having the support in place. Delays to processing payments meant that people were having to pay their support workers out of their own pocket and go into debt in order to pay their support workers, which was obviously putting them under huge financial strain and was simply unsustainable. We heard about a general increase in form filling and outdated paper processing systems, duplication of information sorts, which meant that people said, I sometimes spend more time on access to work itself than on my actual job. We heard that awards seemed to be becoming less flexible and couldn't be taken from one contract to another, something that affected the self-employed particularly, who were having to turn down work because they couldn't get the support agreed in place in time to accept job offers coming in. We also heard that people were facing unnecessary and frequent assessments, which they felt was being used as a way to cut their support. Going over to page 6, to summarise the impact of all these changes, there was lost productivity at work due to the excessive bureaucracy and the loss of support. There was evidence of the loss of income and loss of employment, as we've heard. There was a very sad evidence that there was a feeling of loss of equality and of autonomy in the workplace. People were feeling that they were facing disadvantages at work, and that they were being made to feel like a burden on their colleagues and on their employers. This was causing huge amounts of stress, loss of self-esteem, and a clear negative impact on mental and physical health. There's an overwhelming sense of anxiety that these changes were making their jobs unsustainable, and that their livelihood were at risk, their ability to provide for themselves and their families was under threat. We also heard it was causing an undue burden on employers who were bearing the brunt of the excessive bureaucracy. The conclusions I want to draw from the research are, one, firstly, there is an unacceptably high failure rate in the Access to Work scheme, both in terms of decision making and customer service. In too many ways, the scheme is not fit for purpose and not meeting its original aims of promoting equality for deaf and disabled people. The evidence from the survey suggests that advisors are under pressure to cut award values and to ration support. And this is a really tragically false economy. If you think about the cost to the state of these jobs being at risk and the consequent increase in spending on out-of-work benefits that the state is going to face, surely this far outweighs any savings that they're making in the Access to Work budget through these cuts and rationing. Thirdly, it was clear that deaf and hard of hearing people were by far the worst hit group of customers by changes to access to work. And by changes already made, and the changes that are being rolled out now are going to further impact this group. So 90% of those affected by the cap on maximum awards, the DWP estimates this will be from the deaf and hard of hearing group. And the National Union of British Sign Language Interpreters has warned that deaf workers' jobs are going to be further under threat because of forthcoming changes to the way that sign language interpreting is being commissioned through a new framework agreement. Lastly, I want to put all this in the context of the Green Paper. So the government published a Green Paper on work and health last year, which is all about new strategies for increasing the numbers of disabled people in work. And yet, access to work barely mentions throughout the whole document. Access to work is only available once people have a job, and it doesn't form part of the pre-employment support that the Green Paper is mostly concerned with. Imagine if disabled job seekers, instead of facing conditionality and sanctions when they go to job centres, if they were able to have an integrated access to work advice service so that they could find out what kinds of support they could be available to them and whether or not they'd be eligible for them. This would surely create a huge boost to the confidence of both job seekers and employers and provide just the kinds of leverage that DWP claims to be seeking in increasing the numbers of disabled people in work. So I feel that there's a real lost opportunity here, and I would urge DWP not only to put right all the failings and flaws that have come into the scheme lately, but also to put access to work at the heart of its disability employment support strategy. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin, and thank you for the hard work you put into this. Appreciate it. I'm now going to hand over to Debbie for the Minister, Shadow Minister, Shadow Minister of the Department of Work and Pensions.
Thank you so much, Sean. And my apologies that I was a little bit late. You probably know there's been an emergency debate on universal credit and the rollout, and then there's some media to do on that. So I do apologise for keeping you waiting. But I know Sean was a very excellent co-chair. So and thank you very much for your input there. We move on to the next speaker.